You really seem to know what you're doing. Who are you guys, anyway? And what are you...
Remasters are always a touchy subject, especially when it comes to beloved classics. A lot of fans become feral when the mere thought of their favourite game getting tweaked springs to mind, and maybe they have a right to be this fearful. After all, everyone knows a game's quality is worsened when you bump up the graphics. Jokes aside though, some remasters really do fumble the bag when it comes to retaining a beloved classic's appeal, whether that's due to them launching completely broken, making characters look like they're made out of Play-Doh, or simply due to the fact that they strip away the original's personality for a grittier, more realistic looking game. When it was announced that Dead Rising was getting a remaster, I'm sure fans were both excited and a little skeptical, like I was, your average Dead Rising enjoyer. I was initially worried when I saw the first trailer drop for the Super Duper Deluxe Remaster, but then I started to warm up to the idea of revisiting Willamette through a new lens. People's first impressions were varied. Some people loved what they were seeing, and this guy really didn't. I was somewhere in between these two opinions. I was mostly just excited because it's been an eternity since we've gotten a Dead Rising game. I recently saw that some content creators were getting early access to the game. I guess my code from Capcom must have got lost in the mail, but that's fine though, I didn't mind. I'll just buy the game like everyone else. The 19th of September came and went in the blink of an eye, and after much thought, analysis, and sitting in a position so unhealthy my back will never recover, I can confirm that the Deluxe Remaster of our beloved Dead Rising has some really great aspects, and some that aren't so great. Despite loading into this game with the hope and belief that Capcom could recapture the magic of the original, there's a lot that wasn't translated into this version so well, but it's not all doom and gloom. I can safely say that the game was still fun despite some of its shortcomings. The problems I had weren't really to do with the gameplay, more so everything else. I'd better talk about what I enjoyed first before going on to some of the more questionable decisions Capcom made with this remaster, don't sue me. A lot of fans were a little worried about the changes to the gameplay shown off in the developer diary videos, and by a lot of fans, I mean myself. While we can agree that the original Dead Rising's gameplay is a bit outdated, it still has a lot of great core concepts that make it so addictive. Yeah, it may be a bit janky in some parts, and the survivor AI, well, the less said the better, and some of the changes to the gameplay on show made me think Dead Rising would lose that edge that makes it so challenging. It's a game that's defined by this idea. Managing time and trying to save every survivor and defeat every psycho can be overwhelming at times, but the rewards for your hard work and the fear factor of losing progress makes it a satisfying and scary experience. Now, is the Deluxe Remaster as challenging as the original?
No.
Combat is a lot more streamlined, and by that I mean Frank doesn't feel as stiff as he did in the original. Movement feels a lot more fluid, and you have a lot more momentum, making maneuvers when killing zombies and fighting psychos a lot easier to perform. I wasn't the biggest fan of the reveal that autosaves and time skipping were in the game, because for me, they are very anti-Dead Rising mechanics. I know that later games have autosaves, but for me, Dead Rising 1 is the purest form of Dead Rising that you can just inject straight into your veins. Despite me detesting the inclusion of these two things, I ashamedly did end up using them. I refused to use the time skip for the majority of the game. For someone who wants to rescue every survivor and fight every psycho, it seemed more of a hindrance to give myself less time to do these things. I get there's parts in Dead Rising where there's a lot of downtime, but you could use that time to grind out XP and take photos of PP stickers. There is a part towards the end of the game, however, where nothing is happening whatsoever, and that's when the military first arrives in the mall, and that 12-hour time period is just a complete void. They could have added something in there to spice it up, but they didn't. Oh well, at least we don't have to raw dog this part anymore. Believe me, I tried my best not to give in, but those 12 hours were really stretching, and by that point I just wanted to watch Captain Ponytail get his neck ripped out and watch Frank's hopes and dreams get crushed in front of him, now in high-res graphics. I used the autosave feature when Joe decided to kill one of my survivors, and since I was going for an all-survivor run, that just wouldn't do. Obviously with a feature like autosaving, Dead Rising gets a bit easier because failure isn't so damning, as if you die, you can just reload from a checkpoint. Luckily, another aspect of the game was made more difficult to try and balance this out, and that was the psychos. The Dead Rising 1 psychopaths go to bed at night worried about mini chainsaws. A lot of the fights in the game are pretty easy to get through, but Capcom decided to beef a lot of the psychos up for the remaster. These guys can tank a lot of damage this time around, often making guns pretty useless. Joe in particular tanks so much punishment from your weapons. I can only assume Capcom made her so hard to kill because she was pretty pathetic in the original. Psychos are also a lot more punishing and feel like they have a lot more invincibility frames this time around, which is nice. I really enjoy my weapons just going through them.
That all you got?
The biggest pull for the remaster, besides those brand new textures on Frank's lovely hairy hand, was the survivor AI. The psychology of the savable survivors in the remaster is a lot more in depth. Capcom could have just improved the AI, let them walk around and act like normal people, and just call it a day. But these annoying little shits actually got some depth. They're no longer androids without feeling or brain cells. They start out in a bit of a pissy mood, but can be softened up with their favourite food and a weapon. Or was that your favourite food over there? You'll get what you're given, you ungrateful little bastard. Though it sounds a bit gimmicky giving survivors emotions, it's actually beneficial beneficial to get them to this happy state, as they listen to commands a lot easier and kill zombies more effectively. Survivors haven't just been overhauled mechanically, they actually have dialogue now, well, voice acted dialogue. This was a feature I was probably looking forward to the most, because it really helps with the immersion. It's also used to world build, as survivors will talk about other things that occur in the game. These small pop-ups are also used to help players find things around the mall. Survivors you find will now give Frank hints if they walk past something such as a weapon or a PP sticker. It's obviously done as a way to help newer and younger players who don't know how to look for themselves, as internet brain rot has burned out most of their synapses. Credit where credit is due, the Deluxe Remaster managed to do something that I didn't think was possible. It got me to like Otis. As soon as Frank landed in the mall, I was prepared to be Otis's #1 hater once again, and then I heard him speak.
You ain't planning on going back down into the mall, are you? I wouldn't do that if I were you.
While I can't hate him now if he's voiced by the GOAT, they actually made Otis such a nice and chill dude in the remaster. I think this is helped by the fact that you can use the transceiver while in combat, so there's less chance of you getting interrupted. And even if you do get interrupted, he doesn't even have a go at you anymore.
Perhaps I treated you too harshly.
Certain things have been added into the game that weren't there before. There are a few small things here and there, but the biggest addition for me is the rocket launcher. What a great addition to the game. Frank now has his own personal locker where he can change into the clothes he finds around the mall, and he also has some brand new outfits. Tired of Frank's new mug? Then feel free to change into classic Frank, though when he talks he does look a bit like a skinwalker.
I'm not here to hurt you!
Maybe you're sick of Frank altogether and you'd prefer to play as Chuck Green. Certain things have also been removed from the remaster. Erotica pictures are no longer in the game as Capcom felt it was an inappropriate feature. Kent also acknowledges this, as while he's an unhinged maniac, he doesn't want to get himself cancelled, and tells Frank to take an outtake photo instead of an erotica one. Keeping on the topic of taking photos, Frank's camera has also gotten a massive overhaul in the remaster. The camera mechanic in the original was a fun idea that added some variety to the gameplay. The camera in the Deluxe Remaster is less of a gimmick and more like Frank's most important tool. Instead of a 30 photo limit, the camera now lets you take 100 photos before you need to replace the batteries. That's pretty outrageous, and partnering this with the ridiculous amount of PP you can get from a single photo means you can reach level 10 and upwards before you even enter the main part of the game. Upgrades can also be found for your camera in the different camera stores around the mall, though these are more gimmicky than they are practical. Oh look, I got the flash upgrade. Yeah, just stand there for me real quick. Oh yeah, you look great in that one. That's going on the wall. While you could argue the camera breaks the game because it's so easy to level up with, it does encourage the player to use it a lot more, and it adds more options to the game. Dead Rising doesn't always have to be about killing zombies. Sometimes it can just be about taking cute photos. There's a lot to like from the Deluxe Remaster's gameplay, but one thing I didn't really like was the amount of hand-holding the game does. For some reason Capcom thinks players won't be able to figure things out for themselves. Ah, I see the yellow paint man from Resident Evil has made his way over here. Must have crossed over with the engine. The early part of the Deluxe Remaster is 90% pop-ups of the game telling you what to do. Alright, that's a little bit exaggerated. Maybe 80%. Is it just me, or does the game feel a bit empty of zombies? For some reason the zombies in the Deluxe Remaster don't feel like they have much of a presence. Capcom made the original Dead Rising with the intention of getting as many zombies on screen as possible, which is why the graphics were a bit, you know. And yet we now have the technology to make the game look good and have more zombies, and yet this version of Dead Rising feels like it has less zombies than the original. Weapons last so much longer this time too, and yet there's no point because there's hardly any zombies to kill. I get Dead Rising is more than just mindless zombie killing, but zombies add so much to the challenge of the game. Nothing sets anxiety in faster than trying to escort survivors through a room full of zombies with glowing red eyes, but the remaster makes them barely an inconvenience, probably why I was able to rescue all the survivors on my first try. I'm also gutted that the guide arrow was not called back for his role in the Deluxe Remaster. I like the idea of being able to have multiple scoops on your radar, but I feel like this is only easy to use for the people who already know where these scoops are. All I'm saying is the guide arrow is the GOAT and helps everyone. Remasters are usually released to make video game classics look better, and with this Deluxe Remaster, things are definitely looking a lot better in Willamette. This version of the mall actually feels like a popular outing for all the family, rather than a creepy liminal space. There's a lot more decoration and detail in each of the main areas of the mall. Though they did feel different in the original, the remaster really explores the idea of obnoxious, overly pampered malls. Oh, look at that whale statue, that looks bloody lovely. Capcom really went all in with their flower technology this time. All of these cool additions, and yet you can't add reflections in mirrors. Get your priorities right, lads. There are now a ton more zombie models in the game too, so instead of just running into classics such as Cop Zombie, Knife Zombie, and Shopping Zombie, now you have newcomers like Cool Shirt Zombie, Generic Lady Zombie, and Phasing Out of Reality Zombie. One thing I took note of from the trailers that didn't really click with me was some of the character designs. To be honest, I'm not a massive fan of the art style, as the majority of the characters look like they're made out of clay. That being said, some of the designs have been translated over pretty well. The likes of Jesse, Brad, Isabella, Carlito, and just the random survivors you can save feel like they've been translated over the best because they're just normal looking people. It's the psychos that suffer the most from this art style. I think it's the hair textures that really make them feel so gross. Kent and Adam feel like they've got Fraggles living on top of their heads. It feels like the art style is inconsistent from character to character. Capcom either went too far with the cartoonish side of the character's original design, or just not at all, and it makes for stylistic whiplash. Dead Rising wasn't the most visually appealing game, but the uncanny design carried some of the horror-inspired scenes. While I warmed up to the art style overall as the game went on, it definitely felt like some scenes weren't as gory and scary as they could have been. Come on, you big baby, that's barely a scratch. Look at the original Brad, bro got ripped in half. Although in fairness, Jesse's zombie design was actually a lot freakier this time around, so good job on that. Despite my mixed reactions to the visuals of the game, and a few problems I had with the gameplay, my strongest gripe with the Deluxe Remaster is the voice acting. A main reason Dead Rising is such a memorable game, for me at least, is because of the voice acting. It has some legendary line deliveries, and while some of the writing in the game wasn't the greatest, most of the actors put their pussies into making each character feel iconic. As the Deluxe Remaster went on, I found myself disliking the voice acting more and more. I may be a bit biased to the classic voices, but I was open to the new voice actors and their interpretations of the characters, but some of the performances are just so flat. I'm really mixed on this version of Frank. Don't get me wrong, he's a million times better than Hank East in Dead Rising 4, but the voice the voice actor is putting on is just so quiet and emotionless at times. He sounds like he's trying to do an impression of Norm Macdonald and Baird at the same time. Even when he does put emotion behind lines, it feels like he's doing the wrong emotion. Many of his classic lines from the original have been completely butchered.
What? Did you just say zombies? Kinda. I've covered wars, you know. I'm not sure lucky is the word I'd use.
They couldn't even be bothered putting that one in the remaster. Some characters who are integral to the story don't even have much of a presence either this time. Brad really fell off in the remaster. His delivery of lines is so flat, and there's no variation to his voice when he's being assertive, or worried, or sarcastic. He just carries the same tone throughout the game, and I know for a fact it's not the voice actor's fault, because that guy is talented. I mean, the guy played main. It feels like the biggest factor for this poor voice acting was the direction from Capcom. Some of these line deliveries feel like the actors were given one take, and that's it. Some of the characters don't even pronounce certain words correctly.
I've had about enough of this.
Almost every larger-than-life character feels so deflated this time. The voice acting seems to have been an afterthought by Capcom. They were so busy tweaking the gameplay and upping the graphics that they forgot just how integral the performances of the actors were to the success and memorability of Dead Rising. A lot of the psychopaths felt less intimidating, and that's unfortunately down to their voice performances. Cliff was one of the most intimidating psychos in the original game, and that was mostly because of Steve Blum's unhinged performance. But here he just sounds like a senile old man who can't pronounce his words correctly.
You, son, are gonna tell me where the guerrilla's hideout is.
How did that make it into the final game? This time around he also accuses you of being a
Mo! Bloody Mo!
Kent's new voice is so irritating. Maybe that's what Capcom was going for, but it's honestly the verbal equivalent of biting into something soft and finding something hard. Steven is the next offender. His outburst in the original version is so iconic and quotable for both its absurdity and humorous elements, yet the performance in the remaster doesn't translate any of this well. What happened to you, Steven? You used to be the heart and soul of Dead Rising. Oh well, eat chainsaw. I didn't think all the performances were bad though. This version of Dead Rising really did Jessie justice. Her performance I felt was really strong, and that goes for most of the female characters honestly. Isabella was another standout for me. She felt like one of the more grounded characters in the game, and she was even given some extra dialogue. Frank ain't ever beaten them allegations. Even though I wasn't happy with a lot of the psychos, I did like Joe's performance. The voice actress really played into Joe's predatory side and makes her feel like a truly vile person. Another psycho performance that really stood out for me was that of Adam. I wasn't a big fan of his design, but the voice actor killed it. He captures Adam so well, and it's difficult to tell the two versions apart. Even when ignoring some of the dodgy voice acting, some of the actual sound design in the game felt unfinished. The worst example was when the military first arrived in the mall. Despite no soldiers being near me since I was in the security room, I was forced to listen to their national anthem for a solid 5 minutes straight. Some of the weapon noises don't hit as hard this time either. Guns don't sound as powerful anymore, but I guess that makes sense because they aren't as effective either. It's also weird how boss music starts playing even before a boss fight happens, almost like the psychos are too excited to fight Frank and start the music too early. Some sounds even seem to be missing, like the Space Rider machine just doesn't even make any noise. It just makes the Deluxe Remaster feel a bit amateurish, like I'm playing one of those dodgy fan remakes. Now the real question is, which version of the game is better? Well, that's down to what you're looking for in a Dead Rising game. The Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster's strongest elements are in the gameplay. gameplay, it managed to refine the rougher edges of the original, and while some things didn't click, for the most part it's a really enjoyable experience. It's more the aesthetic side of the game that causes the main issues for me. They managed to make these uncanny faces from the 2006 version look even more uncanny and hard to look at. The Deluxe Remaster is much friendlier to newcomers, the AI is easier to command, Frank can level up much easier thanks to his overpowered camera, weapons last longer, movement is a lot smoother, and autosaves act as a cushion so failure is not too severe. If you're looking for a casual experience that isn't too demanding, then the Deluxe Remaster is probably the version for you. But if you're not a big baby and can handle the pressure that comes with extreme time management, massive hordes of zombies, and survivors that are almost as brain dead as the zombies themselves, then stick to the original. The very first Dead Rising will always be my go-to. Sure, it doesn't look great, and it can be frustrating at times, but there's a reason so many fans were worried about a remaster ruining the game's most goated aspects, which it does and doesn't. If there's one thing I could change about the remaster, it would be to bring TJ back to play Frank, but I am grateful it wasn't as cringe as Hank East.